over the loud hammering.
Okay, we are live. I am Kate Ruffner, and I am the director of the Reclaimers podcast. I also voice the character Percy, and I am live today with a new feature to the Reclaimers podcast page. We are going to be going live. We're going to try this for 2 weeks at the interval of every day. Yay! We're going live with the Empath Counsel. And this is a group of people that the Empowering Tools, which sponsors the Reclaimers podcast, has handpicked to come together and discuss demonstrating empathy. As the Empowering Tools Coalition has witnessed the events over the past few weeks, one of the things that we have talked about is how to get more messages of empathy into the world, because there needs to be more empathy, there needs to be more hope, and we strongly believe that all hope springs, that's the word I was looking for, springs from empathy. So we are trying to get more messages of empathy and more messages of hope. And we have 3 members of the Empath Council here today. And every day we'll have a different question that is going to be our topic for the day. This is certainly not our container as far as discussion goes. We're not going to limit it to this, but we are going to try to answer this question in a satisfying way, not just from an academic standpoint, but also from a personal, experiential, and demonstrative way, because I believe that everyone here will agree with the idea that academia serves to support that experiential or that experience with empathy. So we're going to be talking about those things, promoting understanding, but also wanting to guide people who are empaths to how to use empathy in the loudest way possible. Sometimes empaths think of themselves as quiet forces, so we would like to just amplify that. We haven't got a great diversity today on the Empath Council as far as race goes, but a lot of this was prompted by discussions about race. So you'll see a diversity in race, a diversity in age, a diversity in background, along the Empath Council members who are involved. You might not see a diversity in gender presenting just yet. So we are getting to that point, and there will be more discussion on that later. That's not part of today's topic, though. So what I want to do really quickly is go around and give 2 minutes to each member to just introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your passions, and tell us a little bit about what drew you to the Empath Council. So any volunteers to start? I don't want to pick on anybody.
I can start.
All right, Lindsay Bennett.
Okay, yes. So my name is Lindsay Bennett, and I am passionate about compassion and for compassion for the other and inclusion of the other and things along those lines. And I'm currently getting a master's degree from Utah State in compassionate communication. That's my emphasis. And so I was drawn to the Empath Council because part of compassion, a huge part of compassion, is empathy. And I feel strongly about getting empathy out into the world from academia, like Kate said, and in translating that information for the real life people who need it.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Roxanne or Becky, who's next?
I can go next if you want to.
All right, go for it.
So I'm Roxanne Merkett. I'm a business person, so I have a background in marketing and a master's in communication, but it was corporate communication, not compassionate communication, which I love so much. The biggest thing for me that I have learned over the years that I've been an entrepreneur and things like that is that I have found there is a need for more empathy in business. And so that's what really drew me to this idea, is that I am one that believes business can be kind and compassionate and caring and show empathy. And so often that gets lost in just in the business side of things, right? We see the numbers that we're looking for, and there's not necessarily a hard and fast way to measure empathy in business. And so it doesn't get measured and it doesn't get performed. And so for me, that has been a driving force in the work that I've done for the last many years. And so when this opportunity presented itself, it was a clear yes to say, yes, how can we bring more of this conversation into the business world?
Great.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Thanks, Roxanne.
And
All right, Becky.
And I'm Becky, and I was drawn to this opportunity mainly because I am passionate about doing. I'm passionate about translating what we're talking about, what we're thinking and feeling. And I would argue that a lot of people have at least a slice of empathy, really just part of them. And I think just translating that into action is really really important and vital to make a difference. And so I'm passionate about people understanding the tools that they need to make a difference, even in just a small way. And I frequently have friends who come up to me and say, how can I do this? How can I do that? And it really just takes one thing, one little thing, and empathy is a great place to start. So that's why I wanted to join. A little bit about me. I'm a doer. I do things. I'm in the community. I'm in the business area. I'm in the politics area. I just do a lot of things. So I can't really put a pin on it. So
I like that. Multi-passionate. I like that. That's
multi-passionate.
Multi-passionate. Yeah. Okay, that's great.
And passion is definitely part of it.
Yes. So I wanted to just very quickly say that a lot of our discussions are going to come from varied backgrounds and very purposefully, because one of the things that I think we lose sight of with empathy is that it's very easy to empathize with situations that we seem to understand. The situations that we don't understand at all, that can be a real struggle. And so a lot of people are like, I'm not very empathetic because I don't apply my empathy to situations that I don't understand. When really what it's all about is, that's the whole point of empathy, is finding the situations that you don't understand and then exercising that skill. So we're going to be demonstrating that skill by having varied backgrounds to begin with. So I love that all three of us have these three different discussion areas to sort of bring to bear. So our primary question today is a really big one, and we're going to tackle it the best we can. And the primary question is, what is empathy? How are we defining this? What are we going to move forward with it? And what does it mean? So there are all sorts of implications in that question, and it's purposefully broad so that we can talk about application, how that applies, all of those things. Lindsay, I want to go to you first, and I want to get your thoughts on what is empathy.
Okay, so my simplified version that I share with my students is that empathy is the way that you feel with someone. So sympathy is feeling for someone, and you're like, that's kind of a little bit of distance. You still, like Becky was saying, you have that center where you can feel something, and you're feeling for them. Empathy is different, where you're feeling with them. So an emotion that they're experiencing is resonating with you somehow. And like Kate said, that can be with situations that we're familiar with, that we've experienced ourselves, but it can also resonate in terms of like, I've felt that emotion before. I haven't necessarily gone through that experience, but I felt that emotion. So I can empathize with you on that emotion and what you might be thinking or feeling, or what your body might be doing physiologically with that emotion. And so empathy is feeling with someone.
I like that. Follow-ups. Anyone else have anything to add?
I love how succinct that definition is. I mean, you encompass everything that I've experienced too, and in such a small, to feel with instead of to feel for. I think so often we get confused of, is it empathy or is it sympathy? And they sound so similar, and aren't they basically the same thing? But they're really not. And so I love how succinctly you put that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and one thing I would add that and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong academically, but I think one thing about empathy that is pretty neat is kind of, you've alluded to the fact that we don't have to have the exact same experience as someone, but we have all felt, and we've all had experiences that have changed us or affected us in different ways. And so I think empathy is allowing ourselves to kind of feel again, to allowing ourselves to look at someone and saying, oh, wow, like I've can take that into me, and I can feel that and feel that that was, I know a little bit, maybe not everything, but I know a little bit of what is happening right now. And I apologize for the sound. I am renovating my basement, and so apparently they have a jackhammer today.
You and me both. We both got sounds going. That's
Okay. Summer of renovation and
Yes.
renovating our souls as well.
Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. So then my follow-up question to that, what role does imagination play in empathy?
Oh, wow. I think imagination is huge in it because, like you were saying, Kate, like if I haven't experienced something exactly the same way or in a similar way as someone, then it takes my imagination and my thought process to that cognitive empathy to really connect with that person. We have to imagine what it might feel like. We have to take the perspective of the other person. That's huge in empathy, is putting ourselves in the other person's shoes for the cognitive empathy. So that, I think, imagination plays a big role.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's this idea of being able to envision something that you haven't experienced, right? To envision, and that really is empathy. While we may have, if you create anything, you pull from what you pull from, this experience that you had or this experience or whatever it may be. To have imagination is, I feel like, to take what and to modify it and to tweak it. I mean, even if we're imagining something, if we're creating a story and it's, outside the universe, there's still going to be things that we're pulling. There will be some modification of a tree, or there will be some, something that you say, this is not this, it's this instead, but we pull from what we know. And I feel like imagination within empathy is the exact same thing, right? It's like, listen, I haven't experienced what you're experiencing, but I know enough of that emotion from these experiences that I can basically imagine what it would be like. And so I think imagination, whether it's conscious or not, is so critical. It's so crucial to empathy. It's allowing your brain to take what you know and apply it to something else. And I think it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
I would say too that I don't know that you could fully be presently empathetic without imagination. And I use that by saying none of us have had the exact same experience. I don't care if the situation was the same, if you were the same age, if everything else was identical. The way that you're processing the experience, the feelings that you're having are going to be totally and utterly your own and unique. And we should recognize that and celebrate that when we're trying to be empathetic with other situations. We should never fully say, I know exactly what you're going through, because that's not possible. So empathy without imagination to me seems kind of impossible, because we have to sort of put ourselves in that situation. We have to imagine, either cognitively or, otherwise, trying to figure out, oh, I kind of understand, or I really feel like I totally understand, but I'm still not quite there. So it's integral, and it's a part of empathy without even, I mean, the two are one and the same for me.
Oh, that's interesting that you can't have empathy without imagination. So that leads me to a follow-up question that I'm just curious to find out. What do you do? Is there a difference between situations where you are willingly empathetic and unwillingly empathetic? Because I like what you were saying about present, being presently empathetic, like you're not currently in those circumstances. You can imagine what it's like for them, but you're not the same person as them. So your reaction to things is going to be different. So as I was thinking about that, I just sort of caught on to this idea of, willing empathy versus unwilling empathy. Thoughts?
It's a really interesting concept. I think the idea of willing versus unwilling isn't necessarily one I considered, but I think it's true to a certain extent of when you are. I think that you can be empathetic to a situation, like Becky said, you may be experiencing the very same thing and still have empathy for somebody who's, living the same experience you are, because your lenses are totally different. Empathy is still necessary. And in that case, I think that it's probably unwilling empathy because you're living it versus somebody who's not living it. I'm thinking about like the current the current conversation around Black Lives Matter, right? I'm
Right.
white. I don't know what it's like to be Black in America right now. I don't know.
Right.
And so I have a willing empathy. That's not an unwilling empathy, because it's not something that I have to experience. It's something I'm willing to experience. I'm willing to step into that conversation and experience that, acknowledging that I also have the luxury of turning it off if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that willing versus unwilling, there are other experiences where I have to have unwilling empathy because I can't turn it off. I'm still experiencing whatever the situation may be, because of who I am or because of what life I'm living. I understand that there's that. And so I think willing versus unwilling is interesting. For me, the way my brain goes is, can I turn it off? Or can I not turn it off?
Yeah. Interesting. Becky, Lindsay, any thoughts about that?
One thought I have about that is that we know what we either subconsciously or consciously know what we can handle. And sometimes unwilling empathy can create triggers or create situations that will be really negative for us. I'm thinking of abuse victims or survivors, and hearing or understanding or knowing what someone else is going through is one thing, but trying to empathize and having to relive that can be very, very difficult. So I would say unwilling empathy sometimes is a process of us continually healing and searching for ways to be kind to ourselves and say, okay, this is how much I can handle right now. I think, like Roxanne mentioned, willing empathy is something where I think it's a beautiful thing, because you actually get to the point where you feel like, I can relate to this, and I can lend my strength a little bit. I can lend some strength to this. And in that process, I feel like it's that second level, that's that deeper level of understanding that comes when you then go outside of yourself and use what has been either difficult or great or whatever this experience has been, and use that for someone else. I think that's such a beautiful moment, is when you can willingly empathize and go outside yourself and say, now I'm going to use what I know or what I feel and what I have felt for someone else, not just for my experience that I had, but to help this other person. So I think it's a beautiful thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would add too, like Becky, what you said in the intro of where you want to make a difference. I think that can make a difference for someone in a huge way. And so I think you ladies have really touched on the unwilling and the willing empathy really well. One thing that I would add is about willing empathy. And before willingness comes awareness. So we have to be aware of other people. We have to be aware of what's going on in the world, aware of what's going on with our friends and families' lives, and just aware of people and the experiences that they're having, so that we can offer that willing empathy when the situation comes up, because it will come up.
I love that so much. It reminds me of a graphic that I saw. It's been months now, but it was basically like how to get to empathy. And it's, you work through pity and then sympathy, and then you can get to empathy. And it's that awareness, right? That awareness is like the door that opens up to that staircase. And so I love that you bring that up. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Brilliant thoughts. I'm just sitting here soaking all of this in, going, wow, this is so great. This is everything that the coalition had hoped that it would be. Discussions as far as the parameters and how we demonstrate that. The question about willing versus unwilling has to do with defining things. And Roxanne, you brought up Black Lives Matter. And for a moment, I would like to step up to that discussion very quickly. So
let's do it.
In the first place, I want to acknowledge that this isn't our discussion. We are white. All four of us are white. And I just would like to acknowledge that there's privilege here. There's a voice here that we can't speak to, understanding that completely. And I think some empathy says that. Some empathy says, I can't fully understand what you're saying. And so I wanted to talk for a minute. What about the times when you cannot possibly imagine what someone is going through? What about the times when you want to know and you want to empathize, but as you're hearing those descriptions, or as you are going towards people who are sharing their voices, how do you lend your voice to that? How do you stand up to that? How do you, I'm speaking specifically of allyship with the Black Lives Matter movement, but I'm also making sure, how do we step up to that without overpowering those voices? In other words, where does empathy become a power versus a support? How can we make sure that we're not overstepping that?
I love this question so much. And if you don't mind the stuff in the background, I'd love to speak to this one first.
Please go for it.
For me, because this is a question that I've really wrestled with, right? This is like, how do I, as a white person, support and not like speak over? And for me, it's become redirection. It's become if questions come up, it's redirecting to Black and people of color voices, right? It's become me consuming entertainment, right? So like watching movies, watching documentaries, reading books of Black experiences that are not my own, because I find that when I consume those things, I'm better able to empathize and to understand a little bit more. Not that I get it, because I'm certainly on a journey of trying to get it, but I wouldn't be as so bold to say that I'm there yet, but I'm trying to understand. And so then when I start to recognize things in other white folks, white friends of mine, and I'm going to use the term friends pretty loosely there, to see, then I can, instead of me saying, hey, no, this is how it is, I can say, hey, have you maybe considered thinking about it this way? Here's a great resource, and redirecting. And so for me, if I can redirect, that for me has become one way that I feel like I've been a more empathetic ally, rather than one who just speaks for voices that I haven't lived. And so I feel like that redirection piece is so crucial, and we become better able to redirect when we do the work ourselves, when we consume Black voices, when we pay attention, when we listen to voices that are different than ours. Then we know, hey, we can redirect here, rather than saying, oh, hey, maybe you should think about it. We're prepared and we're equipped to do that redirection.
So the two things that I heard you say there, one was modeling the behavior that you want other people to join in on, and two is become a conduit rather than an expert, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Love that.
Cool.
I love that.
Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
Cool. All right. What else?
So with this particular situation, I wrestled with how exactly to be an ally. And I think that a lot of people want to help but don't want to hurt. And I think you need to recognize that there is still power in what you can do. And I say that not by taking over the conversation, not by doing anything that is out of line, but I think don't be afraid to act that you have to have some one way that is going to make it work. We're all going to mess up. I mean, it is inherent in what is in this situation. I'm probably going to say something stupid, and I'm probably going to do something. And I hope that my friends and family of color will say, hey, yeah, no. And I want to be open to that fact and say, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. But if I'm paralyzed by the fear of getting it wrong, I'm paralyzed to inaction, and that's not what they need right now. That's not what my friends have told me needs to happen. So we went and I took my kids and I said, okay, we're going to go to a rally. We're going to do something. And I had on my son's sign, he helped me figure out different things. And it says, I want to talk, let's talk. I want to listen. Which is a really kind of important concept, I think, because we still need to be able to talk about this. We still need to have the conversation, but let's model listening first. Let's model understanding, amplification of Black voices, those types of things. We can't do nothing, but let's not let our fear lead us to inaction. One thing that I thought was really important in my community was to understand and what my my city police officers are doing. I wanted to amplify the good they were doing, but I also wanted to hold them responsible for what they were doing. I feel like it's a conversation that we can have that both supports those that are at risk, that are being targeted right now, but also can elevate the conversation so that we can have a conversation that is positive. So how you do things, there's no wrong way if you're doing them with love and trying to help and support, and just know you will mess up. And when you do, be patient with yourself and try to come back and learn from that.
And I also think willing to accept the feedback as well.
Yes.
I have seen a couple of instances of people trying to help and then receiving feedback that wasn't exactly what they wanted to hear. And it made me sad because their responses seemed to backtrack a little. And I'm hoping for their growth.
Yes.
And then went looking for those same spaces in myself. You know, what are the things that I do that are like that? What are the things where I can't receive that feedback? All right, Lindsay, I can see that head, that tilt, that it says, you know, I'm ready. I have a thing. I have a thing.
Yeah. So Becky, first of all, I love that your sun's sign included like, let's talk. So that's an invitation that, that maybe he's a safe space. That's what I got from that. And that he's willing to listen. I love that because I think that listening is huge. And like what you were saying, Roxanne, is consuming that information and listening to what is happening. So I think that what I'd like to add is that we need to listen. We need to be there to witness what other people are experiencing and in their whole humanity. So a lot of these things, sorry, I have like this flyaway hair that's somewhere in my glasses. So
I hate that.
try to stop touching my face.
Oh my gosh, I have the thing for you. We'll talk.
Okay.
I'm empathizing with your struggle, Lindsay.
Thank you. Anyway, so I think it's really important to witness people in their humanity. And that, so what I was saying is that like, there's a lot of heightened emotions right now all across the board. And I think that we need to like give people the space to feel that, like feel those things and support them in that instead of like trying to redirect in a negative way, like redirect away from those feelings. Or can't you just be more calm about this or whatever? Like witness their emotion that they're going through and try to see them and be present with them. And another thing that I tell my students is to approach people with wonder and grace. I got that from one of my professors that I love so much. And I'm like, I'm adopting that. So when we approach people,
please say his name.
His name is Jason Gilmore. Thank you for, Jason Gilmore. He's a professor at Utah State, and he is doing a lot with Black Lives Matter right now on our campus. But so approaching people with wonder and grace is being curious about their experiences, being curious about their emotions that they're expressing, and then offer them the grace, like Becky was saying, for their trying. Like this is people who are trying to understand and stuff, and offering grace to ourselves too when we're trying and then we mess up, just, you know, continuing that. So I think that can be a support in the Black Lives Matter movement that I hope is more than a moment, to borrow from the Hamilton, wherever he got that, I don't know, but to borrow from the Hamilton musical. But so I think we can support them by seeing them in their humanity and connecting with that. Because the big thing about empathy is that connection. Whereas I was saying at the beginning, sympathy is feeling for someone, and it's a little bit of a distance. But empathy is drawing yourselves into one another and having that connection. And big, huge things can happen when we see people for their humanity and have that connection with them.
I love that. Wonder and grace. I think that's wonderful. And the other thing that I just want to comment, I have known Lindsay for 20 some odd years. I won't say how many. We've known each other quite some time. And in the past 5 years, I have seen Lindsay just amplify this incredible ability to listen to people with wonder and grace. She's always had that. But seeing this increase in that as she has done this education path has been so cool. So I want to comment a little on that because I think that is part of modeling that good behavior. being that model. Okay, so we've got model, conduit, be willing to take action even when we're scared of screwing up, be willing to make mistakes. We also have taking the feedback, approaching people in their humanity, inviting people, as well as approaching them with wonder and grace. Any final thoughts on how to make sure that we are approaching the conversation fully with empathy without overtaking the conversation? Whoa,
Well,
hold on. I'm about to, sorry, go ahead.
you need a sneeze?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Keep going. It'll come. I don't want to touch my face.
I know. I was just going to say what you mentioned at the beginning of this this conversation was we are going to have varied representation in this discussion. And I would say that one thing that I am trying to do is really just bring my friends and family closer, my friends and family who are people of color closer, and say, I really, I want you part of this conversation. I want to hear from you. I really, and not just as a token or as, one perspective, because there is not just one Black perspective. There is not one Black experience. There are varied, many, and countless, just like you would expect of any situation and any race. So bringing that voice in, I think is so vital to this, because unless we just, we can't do that without it. We have to have their voices.
I agree. To that end, we are actively seeking Empath Counsel members. So just a little pitch out there. If this sounds interesting to you to have a discussion like this, please reach out to me. We'd love to hear from you. You can also just reach out to the page, the Reclaimers podcast page. I check that. I'm the one that gets those messages. I'm the one that responds to those things. So would love to hear from you. All right. This has been a great discussion. I feel like this is a good stopping point. We are going to be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I think, Lindsay, we have you. Becky or Roxanne, do we see you again until Wednesday? No,
Thursday for me, I think.
Roxanne is Thursday. Okay, got it. All right, awesome. So we'll be back tomorrow. Lindsay for sure, and then Roxanne Thursday, and then Becky Wednesday. So, but I will be here. Yay.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, ladies. Great conversation. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.